Hi, and welcome to the second video in our project series for our file monitor. So in the first video, we really went over and created a very basic version of our file monitor in a script version. So anyone that would want to have to add files would have to constantly modify this variable and then run these few lines of code. If they wanted to change the baseline, they would have to change this code here as well. And then to monitor the files, they would have to run this section of code. What we're going to be doing today is actually converting all of these into different functions so we can actually reuse them and make a much nicer script, but also have the functions for our future project, which is going to be creating a GUI version of this. But we're going to do a lot of iterations of this single project just to show you guys all the different steps that kind of go into that development of the end product, and also just to show you guys how I think of a problem and kind of break it down, and how I detect maybe something that I might have to handle that I didn't think about in the first step. So we did have quite a few features that we wanted to have here. So let's just go back to our notepad, which I believe I actually did not keep. So we do have our file monitoring, and I'm going to actually save it this time to make sure that I have it. So we have our file monitoring script. Right now, what we really want to do is, let me just zoom in here. What we want to do today is change our script to have functions. And that's really what we want to do. So it's just more easily add files to our baseline, because right now it is quite difficult, and then a command to simply verify the baseline instead of running the chunk of code. Features that we still want. So we still want our email feature. We will want a GUI eventually, some type of menu probably. So that's what we're going to start for right now anyways. I'm just going to save that here. So let's go ahead and let's start converting our script into different functions and still have it do the exact same thing, but with a function instead. So we're going to start with our first item here, which is adding a file to our baseline CSV. So let's come to the top of the file here. What I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to create a copy of this file here. We're just going to paste that in here. We are just going to rename this for video 2. So what we're going to do is at the top of our script file here, we're going to create a new function. So we're going to use the function keyword, and then we're going to do a add file to baseline. And then we're going to do an open and closing curly brackets. And we're going to make this a commandlet. So we're going to put our commandlet binding in square brackets with an open and close parentheses, and then a param open and close parentheses you can enter in there. And this is where we are going to put our parameters for our function. So right now, when we go to add a file to our baseline, what we really need is the file path for our file that we want to add. And I'm actually going to also specify the baseline file that we want to add it into. This way, already taking into consideration, you might have multiple baseline files because you will have different departments that will monitor different files maybe, or even different employees that might want to monitor different files and make sure that they don't change. So you're going to want to give that option in the script to basically specify the baseline that you want to add that file to. So let's go ahead and let's add those parameters in here. So we are going to go ahead and put a set of square brackets here. And we are going to put the keyword parameter. And then what we're going to also do is put a pair of parentheses, and we're going to put mandatory for this one. Both of these are going to be actually mandatory. And we're going to name this parameter baseline file path. We're going to add another parameter, once again with the keyword of mandatory, and this is going to be the target file path. So this is going to be the file that we want to go ahead and protect with the baseline or monitor with the baseline in our case. And then what we're going to want to do in the function here, first off, is we are just going to want to go ahead and do a try catch statement. We're just going to leave that blank for now. And in the catch statement, what I always like to do right away is just put a return $_.exception.message, and this will just return the error message that we got in the try statement. I've shown this in quite a few other project videos in the past, and also my beginner and intermediate tutorials will kind of explain a little bit more of the try catch statement as well. But what we're going to first want to do in this try catch statement is we're already making these mandatory, so we already know that we're going to get a baseline file and we're going to get a target file path. Now, what I actually want to make sure is I want to make sure that these files exist. And if they don't exist, I want to go ahead and throw an error message to the user saying that that file does not actually exist. I only want to store and check files that exist into a baseline that actually exists. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to do an if, and we're going to do an open and close parentheses, and then another open and close parentheses, and we're going to do a test-path. And our path that we want to check here is going to be the baseline file path. And if this is equal to false, so this is saying if the file path of baseline file path does not exist, what do we want to do? And we want to do a write error. And then we're going to do a message here. And we're just going to write out a message. Our message is going to be pretty simple. We're just going to write baseline file path does not exist. And we're going to specify an error action of stop. And this is going to trigger that catch statement. So that will work at 100% here. And then what we're going to also do is we are going to do a whole other if statement here. Now you could technically combine these if statements, but what I want to do is I want to have them separate, and then this way we can return to the user more specifically what file is missing. So we're going to have our baseline file path and our target file path. So you're just going to copy that and just change the variables in there. And then we're going to have our check already. And then all we want to do is actually copy these lines of code here, which is our code that we used to add the file to our file monitor before. And we're just going to make some few changes here. So for the hash, the file that we want to get the hash for is going to be the target file path. And we're going to want to store the target file path in our baseline path. And in our baseline file path is already there. And then the only thing that I'm going to want to go ahead and do at the end here is just a write output. And all we're going to do is entry successfully added into baseline. So if we're able to execute all these lines of code without going into the catch statement, we know that we've successfully added it into the baseline. So I just like to have that outputted there. This way we know that it's worked correctly. So if we actually just run this code here to put it in our PowerShell, know that it's a commandlet, we can actually do a add dash file to baseline. We're going to pass in our baseline file path variable. And what we're going to do is a target file path. And I'm going to pass in this path here. So let's just put in our test1. But what I'm going to do is actually just put test2 here. And let's see if this actually gives us an error. So it does actually give us an error. It gives us our C scripts does not exist. So we get our test2 does not exist. So that works perfectly fine. If we change that to 1 and put our baseline 1-CSV, so our baseline file is wrong, it's telling us that our baseline file is not valid. If we actually make both of them correct here and we run that, we get entry successfully added into our baseline. If we go into our baseline, we're going to see that there's 3 things there now. So if we actually just go back and run that again, we now see our new line that just got added in here in our fourth line here. So we do know that that code does add very well the files to our baseline. So what we're just going to go ahead and do here is we are just going to go ahead and remove this code. We don't need it anymore. We have our code to add files to our baseline very, very easily now. Now, the other function that we really want to do, if we go back to our text file here to see what we want, is we want a command to simply verify the baseline. So we have the code. All we need to do is create a function for it. So we're going to do a function. I'm going to call it verify-baseline. And we're going to do an open and closing curly bracket. Once again, do the open and closing square brackets here. We're going to do a commandlet binding. We're going to do a param open and close parentheses here. And just go in there. We're going to put some parameters. So this one only really needs one parameter because it just is verifying the baseline. So we do need to make it a mandatory parameter. And we are going to name that parameter. Just fix this up here. We are going to name it baseline file path. And once again, we're going to start this off right away with a try catch statement here. And we're just going to return once again the $_exception.message. And what we're going to do in our try statement here is once again, we're going to want to make sure that that baseline exists. So all I'm going to do is go into our previous function. We're going to copy this. We're going to paste this in here. Now, of course, what you can do, because we're copy pasting code, one of the things that we might want to do in the future is actually make this line a whole separate function to test if the baseline exists or not, and then it'll just give us an error message that way. That would be something, because you never really want to copy paste code. It usually means that you can do some sort of function with it. We'd be able to call the function twice. We can have just a function that will just check if file exists and give us that. So that would be a very, very easy thing to do. But this is only 3 lines of code. We won't really be needing too much other fancier things, but it is a possibility that we might want to create a function for this. This is just something that I just noticed now that we might want to change. So what we're going to want to do now that we've checked if our baseline file exists is now we are just going to want to copy this code that we have here to monitor the files and just paste that in here. And let's just organize the tabs, make sure that they are all nicely fitted in, and that should be good. So now we should be able to take this away here. And let's just run these functions to put them in our PowerShell, make sure that our Visual Studio Code knows that that commandlet exists. And let's do a verify baseline file path. We're going to pass that in here. And there it is. It is actually scanning all the files. And we are also able to add files as we want. So let's just go and add a file here. Let's name it test2.txt. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's just add test2 here. And let's verify the baseline. And there it is. Test2 is now being checked. Now, as you can see, every time that we add test1, it is just adding another entry. So what can happen in this case, and we're going to actually take this as a takeaway for the next video. This is going to be on the next video here. So if we change test1 here, and we go ahead and we just add test1 once again to our baseline, and we go ahead and we monitor it, we are going to see that the test1s at the beginning here hash is different. Something has changed. But at the bottom here in the last entry, we can see that test1.txt is still the same. What we should be doing is we should be checking to make sure that that file path does not already exist in the baseline. maybe give some sort of prompt to the user to say, do you want to overwrite what's already there? Because maybe they don't know that it's already in the baseline. Maybe you don't want to overwrite it. So you kind of want to have some sort of protection in there. You can definitely build the first one and just automatically overwrite what's there. Probably we're going to want to ask the user to make sure that they actually want to do that. So let's go ahead and let's put that in the features that we want when adding a file to the monitor. We want to prompt to overwrite, to remove duplicate entries with different hashes. All right, so this is definitely a feature that we want to add. Now what we did, we already added functions. We've already have a function to easily add files, and we now have a command to verify the baseline. So now all we have is features that we want to create. Now, very quickly, what I would want to do here, this is going to end off the video, is actually we're going to create one more function in this video, and that is going to be to create the initial baseline file. Because right now, we're kind of relying on the user to create this proper baseline file with this CSV file and a path and hash as the header. And that's probably not really going to happen. So let's go ahead and let's create a function here, which is going to be a create baseline. We're going to do an open and closing curly brackets. Once again, put in our commandlet binding. Put in our param here. And once again, we only really need one parameter. It will be a mandatory parameter, and it will be our baseline file path, because this is where we are actually going to create our baseline. And we're going to have our try catch. It's once again just the return $_exception.message. Now, in our try statement here, this is going to be a little bit different, because what we actually want to see is if the file actually exists already, we're going to want to give a message here. So we can actually take away this equals false and change the message to the baseline file already exists with this name. And then this will prevent us from creating a baseline with the same name. That's what we really want to do. Like, we don't want to create something with the same name. And let's just go ahead and let's make sure that this actually works. So if we just go ahead and say we want to create baseline with our baseline file path, and let's put in the baseline file path that we're already using. So we should get a message saying our baseline already exists with this name. So we're getting the error message, which is perfectly fine here. That's what we want. Now, if that error does not actually exist, what we actually want to do is output path, comma, hash, and we want to pipe that out to out file path, and we're going to pipe that out to our baseline file path, and we're going to do a dash force here. And let's go ahead and let's run all of this again. We should get an error message, but if we actually just change this to baselines 1 and we run our create baseline, we will get our baseline file created with our header. We can actually then add a file to that baseline. And there is our file now. And we could then monitor that baseline very easily. It says it's still the same. If we go ahead, we just change that test1. We go ahead, we verify it again. Something has changed. So everything is working correctly. We have some basic functions here, which will let us easily create baselines, verify the baselines, and add files to the baseline. So in the next video, as we want to, we're going to definitely make sure that when you add a file to the baseline and that file is already in there, we're going to want to go ahead and remove the duplicate entries. But before we remove the duplicate entries, we're going to want to make sure that we prompt the user to make sure that that's actually what they want to do. And also what we might want to look at in the next video is also just creating a simple menu, not creating a GUI just yet, but just a menu to maybe you want to add multiple files in a row. You don't want to have to run and just keep creating that commandlet. Maybe we just want to make a menu that will let you type 1 to add a file, 2 to verify the baseline, and then you could just exit out of that application. It's going to be a lot more program based compared to a script. You're going to have a menu, you're going to be able to exit, you're going to be able to pick what you want to do. And then we can start adding in our email alerts, and then finally take a look at a GUI if we don't find any other issues with what we are building at the time. If you guys want any features that you guys would like to see added into this application, please let me know in the comment section down below. If you guys want to see something specific with PowerShell or anything else, please let me know in the comment section down below as well. I will do my best to answer you guys directly. Or if you guys have any comments or questions about this video, please let me know. Also, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Also, make sure to hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out. And I will see you guys on the next video.